people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Piñeiro.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. More action from the women's featherweight division. Unbeaten up-and-comer from Germany, Sarah Liegmann. She is set to be returning to action on the 11th of next month opposite the ring journeywoman, Diana Kulinova.
And what appears to be a developmental fight, a bring-along fight. Sarah's very young. She's only 21 years old.
It's still very early in her career. Fights like this are just what the doctor ordered when a fighter is in the beginning stages of their careers.
Sarah sports professional record of 6 wins, no losses, and no draws with 1 knockout. Just 1 recorded knockout. Sarah, she hasn't proven to be a particularly big puncher. Not yet, though. It's still early, and she's still very young. She may... Later on down the line, when she's a more maturated fighter, she may have a more authoritative punch.
Having debuted as a professional in September of 2021, Sarah's been busy keeping a regular schedule of activity. She fought 2 times that year, 2 times in 2021, 4 times in 2022.
She was last in action in October of last year opposite the ring, the United Kingdom's own Beck Cannelly.
Beck's been in there with everybody. She was in there with Sarah Liegmann in October of last year. This is going to be Sarah's first fight of this year. It's a 10-rounder.
It's a developmental fight.
Sarah Liegmann's second 10-rounder. Her first was in September of last year opposite the ring, Jane Kuvalani.
This is a necessary process for most boxers when they're starting out.
It's more or less why those criticisms levied against Caroline Dubois for her last opponent. Caroline Dubois, who I believe has just 6 professional fights. She's got a 6-0 record. It's for this reason that those criticisms levied against her struck me as odd. I mean, who do you expect a young fighter to be fighting?
You're expecting she should be fighting Godzilla already.
Caroline's last fight, that was a developmental fight. Like this fight is a developmental fight for Sarah Liegmann. The fight with Diana Kulinova set to go down in Cologne, Germany for what is the vacant GBA German International female featherweight title.
Developmental fights are a part of the process, you know. They're a part of men's boxing the same way they're a part of women's boxing.
This will be the second 10-rounder of Sarah Liegmann's very young career. And, you know, she's fighting an opponent that's coming off of 3 consecutive losses.
3 consecutive knockout losses.
The basic idea behind developmental fights like this one is to allow the fighter to progress, hone their skills, work on things whilst mitigating risks.
Opposite the ring, somebody like Diana, Sarah Liegmann isn't under much risk of losing her
But this early in her career, she's not supposed to be. That's the point.
It's about letting the fighter develop.
Sarah is one of 2 unbeaten up-and-comers that hail from Germany, at least in this division. 2 promising ones. There's Sarah Liegmann, and there is Sophia Leash, another promising unbeaten up-and-comer.
News on Sophia Leash's next fight. News on Sophie isn't as forthcoming as the news on Sarah.
Sarah does seem to keep a bit of a busier schedule than Sophia Leash does. Even if Sophie has more pro bouts, it's spread out over a longer period of time. If Sarah Liegmann keeps up this schedule,
she'll catch up to Sophie.
You wonder if this doesn't have all the makings of what could turn out to be a domestic rivalry between unbeaten German up-and-comers. Sophia Leash, the orthodox fighter, and Sarah Liegmann, the southpaw.
They're both very young.
Campaigning at featherweight parallel to each other, neither fighter is anywhere near fighting for a full-fledged alphabet title, a full title. They're
still developing.
Alongside several other unbeaten up-and-comers that hail from different parts of the world. Kara Sardingstall and Raven Chapman from the United Kingdom, Sky Nicholson from Australia.
This is a deep division, a densely populated, talent-rich weight class. There are any number of good fights to make.
Perhaps a Leash versus Liegmann could be one among them sometime down the line. For now, Sarah's going to be returning to action on the 11th of next month. Keep your eyes peeled for that.
As Sarah attempts to advance to a professional record of 7-0, we'll see if she does. In men's heavyweight news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Deontay Wilder has now arrived in Saudi Arabia for meetings about his next fight, options, and is set to attend Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury tomorrow night. Wilder could come face-to-face with Tyson Fury for the first time since their trilogy fight.
You know, sometimes when fighters fight, when they share the ring, they form a bond afterwards. It's not uncommon to see
That happens with some fighters, but not these two. Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, they ain't bosom buddies, they ain't friends.
they didn't go have a pint after the fight.
And that they're both in the same place, sharing the same space here and now, has given rise to the notion that these two guys might fight again, if you can believe that there may be a fourth fight between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, even though Tyson Fury won the last two, and he won the last two fights decisively, by way of knockout. I don't put it past him. In spite of Tyson Fury currently being embroiled in a new set of negotiations for an Alexander Usyk fight, the undisputed heavyweight title fight, in spite of that, I don't put it past Tyson Fury.
Don't forget, this guy fought Derek Chisora for the third time late last year after having already beat him 2 times years before.
Years later, they staged a third fight in what was one of the more pointless and unnecessary trilogies I've ever seen. So the idea that he might fight Wilder for a fourth time, even though he beat him the last 2 times.
I don't put it past him.
And at a time when all the necessary players to make the fight just so happen to be in the same place, Wilder and Shelley Finkel, Tyson Fury.
And his team, his side of it.
They're all over there in Saudi Arabia. They're all over there right now.
But do you really think that Deontay Wilder's team, after the 2 beatings that he took in their last 2 outings, you think they'd want to put him back in there with Tyson Fury?
I do. And here's why.
There's a lot of talk about the potential undisputed battle between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. What are your thoughts on that?
It's good for the sport. You know, it's good for the sport. If Fury doesn't fight Usyk, I would like Deontay to.
Did you hear that? That was Shelley Finkel, Deontay Wilder's longtime manager, saying if things don't work out between Usyk and Fury, he's willing to put Wilder back in there with Fury.
Think about where we are right now.
Think about it. Fury versus Usyk isn't made. It was supposed to go down in Saudi Arabia for a fuck ton of money, but they moved it to the United Kingdom, and now Fury wants the lion's share of the pot, while the Usyk people are insistent they want a 50-50 split.
Think about where we are right now.
Think about how news just broke that Andy Ruiz has parted ways with Al Heyman and the PBC, and how now the Deontay Wilder fight is in the air.
In theory, it could still happen, but what if it doesn't?
What if Andy and Wilder go their separate ways? They don't fight. I mean, why would Deontay Wilder fight Andy Ruiz in a WBC eliminator to become Tyson Fury's mandatory challenger when he can fight him straight away?
He doesn't need to be as mandatory to get him in the ring.
Tyson Fury himself, he won't have to worry about any pesky mandatories hampering his movements, since the fight between Andy and Wilder was supposed to crown one. If they don't fight, then he ain't got no mandatory.
And you see what Shelley Finkel's saying.
They are open to a fourth Fury fight. Granted, we have to entertain the other reports that are out there that just because Ruiz left the PBC doesn't mean the Wilder fight is dead. It could end up being a matchroom show.
In Abu Dhabi.
Word is, the people over there in Abu Dhabi, as part of their championship series with Matchroom, they want to bankroll a couple of big fights over there in that region of the world in order to promote tourism.
One among them could be Wilder versus Ruiz.
In light of these recent developments, what do you as an individual, what do you think is more likely? That Wilder will shoot for a fourth Fury fight, or that he'll cross over to Matchroom?
He still thinks Tyson Fury cheated.
He still thinks there was foul play at work in the both of their fights.
Still got an axe to grind.
What do you think he wants more? A fight with Andy Ruiz, or another shot at vengeance against Tyson Fury? What do you think? What seems more possible and plausible to you?
We have to entertain all scenarios.
A fourth fight between Fury and Wilder isn't out of the question, because Tyson Fury had the audacity, the nerve, to fight Derek Chisora for a third time, even though he beat him the first 2.
He already beat him 2 times.
And not only did he fight him for a third, he had the nerve to bill it as a box office fight, a pay-per-view, so I don't put it past him.
He's been diminishing Alexander Usyk in every way possible, in every way that he can, even though Alexander Usyk beat the guy that he wanted to fight. fight in front of everybody 2 times.
It's not like those pay-per-views didn't sell, you know. They did, and it's not like the Brits aren't familiar with Alexander Usyk. Alexander Usyk's fights have been marketed to Brits the last couple of years. The Bellew fight, the Chisora fight, the 2 Anthony Joshua fights. They know who the guy is. But that hasn't stopped Tyson Fury from devaluing him.
Question is, how committed do you think Tyson Fury is to that fight? How committed do you think Tyson Fury is to fighting Alexander Usyk? What do you think it means to him to become this division's undisputed champion?
Does he fancy it, or would he prefer to go back in there with a guy he beat 2 times already and get a fuck ton of money for doing it? If they're in that region of the world,
All that oil money, all those wealthy sheiks.
money that me and you can't even fathom, money that me and you can't even imagine. If they were, in theory, willing to bankroll a 4th fight between them,
In theory.
you might be thinking to yourself that there's no audience for a 4th fight. Between the 2nd fight and the 3rd fight, you saw a noticeable decline in the buys. That the 2nd fight did around 800,000 buys, where the 3rd fight only did about 6.
200,000 buys less.
You may be thinking to yourself that there really isn't an audience for a 4th fight, but need I remind you, if the sheiks over there in that region of the world subsidize this fight,
Somebody over there decides to bankroll it.
pay for the fight, pay the fighters, they'll be the ones assuming the risk. Not Bob Arum, not Frank Warren, not Shelley Finkel, not nobody, just them. And they've got the kind of money over there to where it's no risk to them.
The deal structure would be entirely different to what we saw the first 3 times.
You saw Deontay Wilder say that he's an open agent moving forward. He's willing to fight on any platform. You saw Shelley Finkel. You just saw Shelley Finkel say they're open to a 4th Fury fight.
Ruiz is a free agent.
And his fight with Deontay Wilder is in the air. We don't know if it's going to happen. We don't know it isn't.
And you see what's going on between Fury and Usyk. The Usyk people want a 50-50 split, and the Fury people want to A-side them. They want the lion's share of the pot.
It's all very immaterial right now at heavyweight, so we can't rule anything out.
But could Fury actually get away with skipping out on Usyk to fight Wilder again?
Would the Brits let him live it down? Well, I'll tell you that the camper community, to the camper community, Fury can do no wrong. Whenever something goes awry, it's always anyone else's fault. Everyone else's fault. But Fury's.
With them he can do no wrong.
But with everybody else, I'm not so sure.
Even if somebody in that region of the world wants to bankroll this fight, even if they're willing to.
How many people over there in the United Kingdom want to see these 2 guys run it back? How many want to see a 4th fight? How many in America?
How many in England?
The vast majority of fight fans watching this situation unfold at heavyweight are already blaming Tyson Fury for the fight with Usyk's potential collapse.
Don't believe me. Take a poll.
Do your own poll, take your own survey, and see who people blame for this fight's collapse if it collapses.
They're already blaming Fury.
So imagine if he ends up fighting Wilder again.
Instead of Usyk.
And finally, in men's light heavyweight news, Team Beterbiev says Artur is willing and ready to fight Bivol in June, despite Ramadan.
How many times have you heard me say that for a man Artur Beterbiev's age, at this stage in his career, this is the only fight to make?
Artur Beterbiev apparently has no reservations taking part in the biggest fight of his career on the heels of a month-long period of fasting. Earlier this week, BoxingScene.com reported that Beterbiev, the WBC, WBO, IBF, and light heavyweight champion from Russia, is currently in talks with compatriot Dmitry Bivol, the WBA titleist for the undisputed 175-pound championship this summer, possibly in June in Abu Dhabi. The news was greeted as something of a pleasant surprise, as it appeared that a Beterbiev versus Bivol fight was simply not in the cards for 2023 because of business politics. Beterbiev is promoted by Top Rank, a company that exclusively showcases its fighters on ESPN.
Bivol's on Matchroom.
Underneath it all, the people at Top Rank know that Dmitry Bivol, he has options, perhaps more options, better ones than Artur Beterbiev. All Artur's got are mandatories in the queue.
He's not getting any younger.
Whereas Dmitry, he's still in the running for another Canelo Alvarez fight. All the money that he made from the first one and what he stands to make for the second one.
A second fight.
People at Top Rank have to factor that into the equation if they were to entertain bankrolling the fight themselves, bringing Dmitry over to their side of things.
Might be expensive.
To do a fight between 2 Russian nationals where? On American soil? In an interview with BoxingScene.com, Eddie Hearn, the head of Matchroom, told Declan Taylor that one of the potential obstacles to the fight has to do with its timing, particularly as it relates to Beterbiev. The 38-year-old Beterbiev, a devout Muslim, would be coming off of the Ramadan holiday, a period that lasts from March 22nd to April 21st. Hearn seemed to suggest that Beterbiev would have to be willing to fight off the back of Ramadan in order for the full unification bout to take place next. Bivol, 32, has a stacked plate for 2023. He will likely engage Canelo Alvarez in the fall.
Hearn also noted that his charge, Joshua Buatsi, could potentially step in to fight Bivol.
But according to a member of Beterbiev's inner circle, Anthony Rudman, a legal advisor for Beterbiev, the June date is simply not an issue for their side. Rudman pointed out that Beterbiev fought in June last year when he unified 3 belts against Joe Smith Jr. at the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden in New York. What Eddie Hearn was saying is correct. Rudman told BoxingScene.com there are going to be negotiations for a Beterbiev versus Bivol fight in June in Abu Dhabi. Artur's wishes are to fight against Bivol next, and I think he's been pretty clear about that after his last fight against Anthony Yarde. He will be ready to fight Bivol in June, despite Ramadan. I've seen some articles saying that June is right after Ramadan and that the fight can't happen. What I can tell you is Artur is willing and able to fight in June.
It's welcome news. It's all welcome news.
Artur needs this fight. The sooner the fight happens, the better, because he ain't getting any younger.
His alternatives won't pay him what this fight can pay him.
Actually, he fought in the middle or the end of June against Smith. The June aspect is not a problem, but the negotiations are really between the promoters, between Top Rank and Matchroom at this stage, and they are ongoing.
Top Rank sent Artur Beterbiev to New York for the Joe Smith Jr. fight, and more recently they sent him to London for Anthony Yarde.
As a defending champion, a traveling one.
That's likely because Artur Beterbiev, God bless him, capable and entertaining fighter that he might be, he's just not a draw. Not for them.
Rudman said that he believes Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates, would be an appropriate place for the fight because of Beterbiev's Islamic heritage. Bivol fought his last fight there in November, a dominant points win over Gilberto Zerto Ramirez. Beterbiev, who resides in Montreal, is used to traveling. He has won all 3 of his titles on foreign soil. Beterbiev's last fight against Yarde in January took place in Yarde's backyard of London, and Artur almost got screwed in London.
Screwed on the cards. You know, 2 of the 3 judges had Anthony Yarde up going into the 8th round.
I didn't have it that way myself. I had Artur up.
You think they were going to rob that guy?
I do. I think the people at Queensberry and the people at Top Rank saw more money in Anthony Yarde becoming a reigning champion than Artur continuing as one.
Continuing his reign. I think they were going to screw him.
Lucky for him, he took it out of the judges' hands. Artur wants this fight to happen, Rudman continued. Artur's goal has always been to unify all the titles. He won the IBF title, and then he unified with Vosdik, and then he unified again when he fought Joe Smith Jr. When he fought Joe Smith, it was under the condition that he fight the mandatory challenger in Yarde, which Artur did in January. Now that his mandatory is out of the way, Artur wants to unify. The unification right now is against Bivol, who is the WBA title holder.
It's the fight he wants next, according to Rudman.
What I think is that perhaps the people at Queensberry and Top Rank would have preferred that Anthony Yarde had won the fight because there would have been more money in it for them. You know, he would have turned out to be more of a draw in London than Artur is anywhere.
2 of the 3 judges had him up going into the 8th. I didn't.
Did you? Top Rank hasn't turned this guy into a draw his entire tenure there.
It's not because he's not entertaining. He's entertaining.
But he's not a draw. And I really feel like Top Rank in and of themselves, they've done all they can do for him. The best thing they can do now is just ship him off to Matchroom and roll the dice.
There's no sense in dragging this out any longer.